So if you look at the heading of section 98 to the Doctrine and Covenants, it gives a great summary of what happened between 1831, August of 1831 when it was dedicated, and 1833 when we get kicked out of independence just 2 years later. The heading of 98 says, quote, increased settlement of church members in Missouri troubled some of the other settlers who felt threatened by the saints' numbers, political and economic influence, and cultural and religious differences. In July of 1833, a mob destroyed church property, tarred and feathered 2 church members, and demanded that the saints leave Jackson County or leave Independence, leave our city of Zion, our New Jerusalem. Well, what happened? There's a number of economic and political and religious factors. There's also some doctrinal factors that I'll talk about with you as well. One of the cultural factors that I hope we grasp was that we proclaimed that Native Americans were not a scourge on the land, that this land belonged to them, and that they're children of Israel, that they're members of the covenant. We openly baptize people of color. We ordain black people to priesthood offices, people like Elijah Abel and later Q. Walker Lewis. And so one of the issues that comes up has to do with our progressive nature in race relations in the church. The question comes up, what if a black Latter-day Saint wants to gather to Zion? Can they? Well, the problem is, in Missouri at this time, they have a law on their books that says that there can be no black person in the state who is not a slave. You cannot be free and be black in Missouri at the time. So W.W. Phelps writes an article in the church's newspaper, the Evening and Morning Star, in July of 1833, when these problems come to a head. He says, quote, to prevent any misunderstanding among the churches abroad respecting free people of color, who may think of coming to the western boundaries of Missouri as members of the church, we quote the following clauses from the laws of Missouri. He then cites Missouri Law Section 4 that states, quote, no free Negro or mulatto other than a citizen of someone of the United States, meaning you're a slave, shall come into or settle in this state under any pretext whatever. W.W. Phelps then says, wisdom would dictate great care among the branches of the Church of Christ on this subject. So long as we have no special rule in the church as to people of color, let prudence guide. You can't read between the lines there. What W.W. Phelps seems to be saying is, hey, that's Missouri law, and we don't let Missouri law govern what we're going to do with building the New Jerusalem in Zion. And if free people of color want to gather with us, come gather. That does not sit well with local Missourians. The locals respond with W.W. Phelps to his article with their own manifesto. And they say, quote, we, the undersigned, citizens of Jackson County, believing that an important crisis is at hand as regards our civil society in consequence of a pretended religious sect of people that have settled and are still settling in our county, styling themselves Mormon, and intending, as we do, to rid our society peaceably if we can, forcibly if we must, and believing as we do that the arm of the civil law does not afford us a guarantee, or at least a sufficient one, against the evils which are now inflicted upon us, they go on to say, we want to form ourselves into a company for the better and easier accomplishment of our purposes, a purpose which we deem it almost superfluous to say is justified by the law of nature. Translation, we know it's not lawful to do this, but we're going to drive these people out of here. We call it a mob, they call it vigilante justice. In 19th century rural America at this time, antebellum America, a lot of it was governed by keeping peace and mob rule this way. That if there were undesirables in your community, you warn them out, you push them out, you get them out. And that's what they decide to do. And notice here, one of the issues at hand is what W.W. Phelps just said of our progressive views on race. In the late number of Star, published in Independence by the leaders of the sect, there is an article inviting free Negroes and mulattoes from other states to become Mormons and remove and settle among us. This exhibits them in still more odious colors. They go on to say that they think it's their goal is to instigate Black Latter-day Saints to rise up against Missourians as a whole. They go on to then say they declare that God has given them this land and country, that sooner or later they must and will have possession of our lands for an inheritance. You can understand why they might think that. They then say, we will meet at the Courthouse Town of Independence on Saturday next, the 20th, to consult on subsequent movements. So that's what leads to them then tarring and feathering, destroying our printing press, and causing us to leave. You've seen the church videos, you've heard the history on that. I don't need to get into that. I just want to share with you some of the cultural things that seem to have been contributing to some of the, not all of it, but some of the conflict there. But I want to end by talking doctrinally about why the city of Zion fell. Because after we're kicked out of New Jerusalem, the Lord does not say, well, it was because of a mob or vigilante justice or because of progressive views on race for the time. It doesn't say it's because of religious reasons that we didn't jive well with the locals. The Lord gives the reasons himself. And the Lord's reasons all come out in section 101 of the Doctrine and Covenants. If you have your scriptures, turn there with me. Let me read to you. In section 101 of the Doctrine and Covenants, verses 6 and 7, look what the Lord says. Behold, I say unto you, there were jarrings and contentions and envyings and strifes and lustful and covetous desires among them, meaning among the Latter-day Saints with each other. Therefore, by these things they polluted their inheritances. They were slow to hearken unto the voice of the Lord their God,